Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. All right. Well, hello, Linda. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. I want to welcome you to my podcast. You and I met through actually a previous guest that I had on the show, and she thought that we would be a really great connection and you'd be a great guest. And when we did our pre-call, I thought, oh my God, I need to get this woman on my podcast because you help people publish their books. And we're going to get right into the whole framework that you use. When I think about midlife women, sometimes there's an event that happens and things make them change. And one thing that does typically come up is the fact that they want to write a book, a memoir, or I've seen some where it's been more fiction, but a lot of it is nonfiction. And so that's why I think you are a really great resource. You've got a really nice framework. You've got breadth and depth in the industry. So why don't you give us a little bit of your backstory and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. So thank you so much for asking me to be on this podcast. I'm very excited. And as you say, women of our age group, we've learned a lot, we've lived a lot, and, people come to the point where they want to share that knowledge, whether it's, thought leadership or their own story or, a story that just haunts them, a fiction story or poetry, something. So my background is in publishing. I've been working in publishing for more than 25 years. I was in-house for a very long time as a creative director, most recently at Oxford University Press, where I was the creative director for the academic division. And we produced like 3,000 books a year. I had a global team of 45 designers and art directors. And then in 2017, life changed and I started Studio Secondari, and I was working with traditional publishers, developing books, and I started to have a trickle of what I call independent authors, indie authors coming to me with their own stories. And I was able to give them, through my company, Studio Secondari, I was able to give them like a really professional publishing experience, but allowing them the agency that often you don't get with a traditional publisher, especially if you're a first-time author. A lot of decisions are made for you instead of with you. And I find that, people in their 50s, they are confident and they want to make their own decisions, or at least they want to be collaborated with, taken under advisement. So I realized after a few years that my heart really was with working with these indie authors and helping them bring their books to audiences and working with them to develop those, whether it's a manuscript that's already written that needs just some editing and production, or books where it's just an outline and I'm coaching them and getting them through the writing process. And sometimes people have, a book idea, but they're really not the messenger. They're not the person who should be writing that. And then we can put a team together for them to help them get to that point, to get a manuscript and ultimately a book. So that's really my motivation, is to help give voice, authors who otherwise wouldn't have a voice.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And when I think about you and your career path, I think about a lot of women that I've talked to that are in their 50s, midlife, just 40s, 50s. And the first thing they say is, I have no skills. I don't know what to do. I want to try to find more purpose in my life and more sort of things to do, that, sort of I enjoy, but I have no skills. I have nothing to bring to the table. But then, you think about you and, you were in this sort of big publishing situation, eventually just you were on this path. And you created your own agency, you're on this path, and then people started to show up that sort of prompted your interest and said, hey, listen, maybe I can work with some of these indie authors. And so that's the encouragement and the message that I want people to get from this podcast, is that we have experiences, you have skills. You said you've got this sort of mix of confidence and moxie in you now in midlife, which we all know once you get to midlife, that is very true. You don't really care anymore what people think. You just get out there and do it. And so I think that's just such a nice story for you, for like your prime example of never once did you say, I'm going to go and start work with these indie authors. A couple found you and you're like, hey, this is something that I'm passionate about and I like, and therefore I'm going to start working with it. So I love that story. I love the evolution of your story. And it just feels much more sort of intimate, I guess, for you and really fulfilling your purpose now kind of thing. So when you say, there's so many questions I have for you. So I know you have a framework. We'll get into that a little bit as well. But the one thing that I think about first is, a woman sitting there thinking, okay, I want to write a book. Take me through like what kinds of books, because I think that's where they first get stuck. They could possibly get stuck is, oh, okay, well, I have this idea. Oh, but no one's going to want that idea. No one's going to like that idea. So give me some categories of like, what could I write about if I was thinking about, God, I think I've got a book in me.
Yeah, well, categories are almost limitless, and I'm happy to talk to you about different publishing categories. But I do want to say that if you want to write a book, just start writing,
Okay.
Just start writing, make a date with yourself. Morning pages is a great way to sort of unleash your subconscious and your creativity. Having a practice where once you're up, you just write for 15 minutes and you really don't let the pen leave the paper. That's one style. It doesn't have to be that way, but really just start writing. And in the act of writing, I think you'll begin to see where you're gravitating, and give yourself 2-3 months of just writing. And then look back at because it's amazing, especially if you're writing by hand in a journal. I mean, you'll go through so many journals doing that, even if it's only 3 or 4 days a week instead of 7, regularly giving yourself 15 minutes, 30 minutes to write. Go back and look at it. And I'm quite certain that you're going to see some sort of a theme. But what kinds of books are there? I mean, there are all sorts of books, but there's poetry, there's children's books, there's all sorts of different kinds of fiction. There's young adult fiction, romance,
Yeah.
noir.
Yeah. You could actually put all your fantasies into a
fantasy. Exactly. I mean, there's a huge ravenous audience for fantasy, or romantasy is like very popular right now. Then there's thought leadership. We've all got a lot of life experience. Thought leadership can be in the domestic sphere around, domestic or wellness issues, child rearing, older kid rearing, launching kids. Those are all topics, but also professional thought leadership, the experience of being a woman in business. Obviously, there's books like Lean In, there's some very famous books from very influential business leaders, but I think that there's a lot of space for women who, aren't Sheryl Sandberg, women in other positions in business. But, thought leadership can be about like how to organize your files. It can be small or it can be large. Again, I think that by having a writing practice, you will begin to see where the opportunities are.
Where your heart is going with it. Yeah.
Following your bliss.
Exactly. I love that. I love how you coined it, the morning pages. You could call it the afternoon pages or the evening pages, really, but it's like sort of committing to just that download. Secretly,
I do want to just say I didn't come up with it's morning pages is a kind of famous method, and I'm completely blanking on her name, but I can get it to you for the show notes.
It doesn't matter. You've shared it, and it's perfect. You can take it and create it as your idea as well. The one thing secretly I should tell you, when you were saying that, every evening now I've been using my voice notes to just download the day, and I've been doing that now and it's usually, I don't even know how many words it is. It's just this constant stream. I don't even go period, new paragraph. I just it's just verbal run on. But I do, secretly, I do not, well, I guess it's not going to be a secret anymore, but I'm uploading it into ChatGPT. And every day I start it, like today is January 1st, blah, blah, blah. And I just download. And it's been interesting because as I've gone through and I've started to kind of sort of parse out the themes, you're right. Themes are forming and you don't even really know. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. I love that idea because I think we can get stuck. Right. And so like, how many people have you run into that get a little bit stuck on their idea? They're going sort of gangbusters. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, I don't know. Something has happened to them. Their gremlin somewhere along the line has given them a halt. What do you think causes that? Or have you had anybody?
Absolutely. And first of all, I want to say that I love that technique that you have. I think that that's great. And you probably have a book in there somewhere. So I would recommend that.
Well, I'll be giving you a call, Linda. Don't you worry.
Please do.
Once I've got about 4 months under my belt.
You know, if you're people who are like driving or commuting, like they may not be able to write in a journal, that is a lovely alternative. I'm going to steal that idea because I think that's genius. Yeah, no, well, we are all our worst editors and most critical voices, obviously. You know, writing ultimately is a creative process. All creative processes force us to be really exposed because we're showing how we view the world, how we interpret the world. You know, my background is as a graphic designer. I went to art school. You know, you had your crit, you had to put your art on the wall and everyone would tear it apart. Your fellow students, your teacher, you know,
Cringe.
Everyone. And, you know, it's the same if you're any kind of a performer. And, you know, and writing is like that. You're putting it out there. So there's always, I think you get to the stage, like there's the honeymoon stage where you have the bright new idea and you're so excited and you have the new notebook and you're like writing and it's going to change your life. And then you get to that stage where you realize, oh, someone's going to need to look at this and I don't know. And maybe it's stupid and you're just questioning yourself. And I think it's similar. All creation is kind of like birth. You know, I have 2 children. I'm familiar with birth. And, you know, there's that wall, you know, you hit that wall during labor where you're like, you don't think you can go on, transition, so painful, but you got to push it out. You got to get that baby out somehow.
Yeah.
Because it's existential necessity. Unfortunately, with writing, with all sorts of art, it isn't that existential necessity. You know, you don't have to push that work out. You can seize up and never release it. And, you know, so I just think you got to keep going. Just keep going. Just breathe in small steps and keep going.
And, you know, that's interesting you're saying that, Linda, because I was thinking like sometimes when I'm usually laying in bed doing this sort of download for the day and in my notes. And sometimes like in my mind, I thought, God, you know, maybe this would turn into a book, but we'll see. But then as I've started to recognize these themes, it started evolving. Yes, okay, there probably is a book here. Okay, I'm not sure. Maybe I still need to narrow down the themes, but one thing I've realized is now I'm catching myself maybe not saying those vulnerable things because, oh my God, what happens if somebody listens to this and they think, oh my God, she's a imposter or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And that I think right there is that little gremlin creeping into my mind saying, I wouldn't be so vulnerable. That's not good, Lynette. And then it becomes too vanilla, you know, it becomes too much of like, you know, candy floss ice cream kind of thing, you know, and I think just sort of overcoming that gremlin and really being vulnerable. That's, you know, you and I talked about this in our pre-call. People want vulnerable. That's exactly what you said to me. They want vulnerability. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think sorry, go ahead.
You can't be liked by everybody. You know, it's kind of like the high school conundrum, right? You know, in our hearts, we wanted to be popular. We wanted everybody to like us, you know, but there's no lasting power. No one wants to have peaked in high school because, there's no lasting power with that kind of popularity. It's fine to find your tribe, you know, niching in this world of expansive social media presence where everybody could see everything, actually, you know, everything is discoverable. It's overwhelming. So actually finding a narrow niche where you have real loyalty and, you know, simpatico with your audience, that's where you get real strength. You could potentially sell to 100,000 people and, 1% will buy your book. Or you could potentially sell to 5,000 people and 30% will buy your book, and that 30% will follow you and buy your next book. It's that smaller group with higher loyalty is what you really want.
Exactly. And sort of a parallel example of that is even just, there's so many people on Instagram right now that are talking about how much, or TikTok, how much money they're making, da, 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 da. And now I'm seeing these promotions, like you don't really need 500,000 followers, 100,000 followers. How to make, X amount of money during, in a month with 400 followers because they're loyal, like you said. So sell to the niche. I love that. Yeah. Niching down is definitely in sort of a theme across anything I think that you want to do. Even if you're developing a product, not everybody's going to want to buy your product. So find that avatar, if you will. I think it's a good segue into, all right, so now it's been, let's say, 6 months of my talking into my voice notes, uploading into ChatGPT, and I think I've got it narrowed down to a few ideas. I knock on your door and I say, okay, Linda, let's go. What should we do? So what is the first step? You've got a framework and you're about to share that framework with us.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing that I want to know from an author is, why are you writing this book? What is your burning desire? And I have absolutely had authors come to me and say, I want a New York Times bestseller. I want significant passive income. I want to get a literary award. And those, although wonderful motivations, and if you don't have a book, none of those dreams or aspirations will ever come true. Those are not, for me, valid motivators because they are tenuous at best. They are like winning the lottery. Again, you got to be in it to win it. So I'm not here to poo-poo anybody's dreams, but I want to have motivation that is more attainable because it's going to be frustrating. I think that there are, people in my industry who will tell authors, oh yeah, sure, we'll get you on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm not going to do that because the likelihood is very low. But if someone says, I'm motivated because I think this would help my career, that's a legit motivation because especially if you have, if you're a public speaker or a teacher or, anywhere where you have groups of people that you could potentially sell your book while you're speaking with them, that's an amazing opportunity. You also, might be able to boost your authority if you have this, a methodology or a process and you have a book that you can point to. That's absolutely helpful. You may just have a message that you want to lift others up. You have some sort of an experience in your life, a trauma or something that you've overcome, and you want to tell other people how you've done that in the hopes of bringing them along. That's beautiful because that's rewarding in itself. You want a legacy. You've lived a life. You want your children, their grandchildren, your ancestors to know about this, and people maybe have, with similar backgrounds to have access to that legacy. Maybe you just have always wanted to be a published author. You just want that experience. You want to have that book. You want to be able to give it to your friends. All of those are absolutely worthwhile motivations. And then, who knows? Maybe you will get on Good Morning America and have a New York Times bestseller. Who knows? Because again, if you don't have the book, it's absolutely not going to happen. So there's a chance, but don't make that your primary motivation because that's going to be ultimately probably disappointing. Whereas a more attainable motivation in those days when you're second guessing yourself and wondering why you're spending so much time and effort on this thing, if you have a motivation that's really attainable that you can imagine in your mind, that's the best thing. So for me, that is the first thing. Why?
Yeah.
Then the what. And we've kind of already talked about that. What is the topic that you're called to share? And we've talked also about niching down. Because often, people will say the Sheryl Sandberg book, I'm a female executive. I want to write a book about female executives. That's great. There's a lot out there. There's a lot out there, and you're competing with some very big names. But if you niche it down, so I love the Jen Sincero book, You're a Badass. I think what she did was she saw there's Sheryl Sandberg, Brene Brown, there are all of these really big names talking about female leadership. I'm going to talk about female leadership to my generation, So Jen Sincero, she's like, I'm going to talk to my millennial girls, and I'm going to speak to them in this kind of like casual, snarky way about kind of mid-level management and getting some sunlight. And that has made an amazing following. And she's got like 4 or 5 books. And if you go on Amazon and you compare like her reviews to Sheryl Sandberg, she has more reviews because she's got a niche audience that's really invested in her. I think, Sheryl Sandberg may have sold more with her initial hardcover publication, but Jen's got a real sincere audience. So, what do you want? What do you want to publish? And then how can you find a way of publishing that thought that's going to find an audience? So that's part of positioning. And positioning is one of the things that I do with my authors at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Is looking at what other books are out there. Where's the bookshelf that your book is going to sit in? Mm-hmm. And do you want your book to differentiate itself from those books, or do you want it to feel like a partner with those books? Those are conversations that we need to have.
Before you go into the third step, let's just go back a little bit, because I have no, not at all. I wanted to go back to this sort of motivation. I totally agree. If it's just to get on to be a New York bestseller, it's not really, I don't know if it's coming from the heart then, and how you write the book might not even have that vulnerability. Like, is that what you're sort of thinking, is that if the motivation isn't there, you're sort of gapping, and therefore the book may not be as effective? Is that what you're...
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to the popularity analogy I was making earlier. If you're trying to appeal to everybody, you're not going to appeal to many people, actually. It's going to be pretty milquetoast, Whereas if you go out with like a very distinctive, I'm rereading Big Magic right now by Elizabeth Gilbert. Eat, Pray, Love. Now, that was an unlikely New York Times bestseller. If you think about it.
Yeah.
It was a memoir of a woman who nobody knew, who had no significance. It was beautifully written. And it just hit at a good time. It was an interesting story, but a really unlikely story. I don't personally know how she got that book deal, because if I recall correctly, she got the book deal, and that's how she funded her Eat, Pray, Love trip, was with the book deal.
Wow.
So I don't know how that happened, but it really was, to my mind, I don't think even the publisher who gave her, I think it's Crown who publishes her, I don't think they expected it to be anywhere near what it became, because that's just unlikely. It was highly unlikely. But it was an interesting book with the right author who wrote beautifully and told a story in a way that was evocative. It got, it was a summer read, I think, and everybody, heard about it, and it did magnificently well. And she's, been able to ride that. Elizabeth Gilbert has been able to kind of ride that wave. She did have a fiction book that I think sort of didn't do well, but all of her memoirs have done amazingly well, and she's coming out with a new one I just read. So,
but if you think about that, I think when I think about, reading that book and then I actually listened to it on Audible, and then I, obviously watched the movie, which is a bit more glorified. But I think for me, it just strikes like, it's a good example, because it strikes, she wrote with vulnerability,
so vulnerable.
Right. And I think when I think about identifying your avatar, even for a business that you want to launch, which is kind of what I help women do, is, from idea to first client, the one thing I try to get very clear is, what is that secret the person that you want to serve, that they're not telling anybody. And I feel like she exposed a bunch of secrets.
She did, absolutely. And so this comes to my audience.
Mm-hmm.
The third question in my methodology is the who. And Elizabeth Gilbert, I think her who was women who were in their 30s to 40s who actually didn't want to have children, maybe didn't even want to be married, had kind of bought into this whole story and then realized, I'm not alone. Here's this woman. She's absolutely experiencing my feeling. Now, obviously, a lot of other people jumped on that bandwagon, like I read it and I had 2 little kids when I was reading it.
Yep.
But it was still, for me, it was a vicarious sort of like thrill, because my kids were actually really little. So I was like, this is the alternate life that I could have had,
Right.
kind of thrill.
Exactly.
But she had that initial, I think, very loyal audience of people who all of a sudden felt seen. She was vulnerable and they recognized it. And then they proselytized it. And then it became what it is. So that's the power of niching and finding your audience and being authentic to your audience so that they recognize you immediately.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And so after motivation, then you were talking about, I've just lost the second step. the motivation, and then it's kind of like, where's the fit, right? And you're kind of doing market comparables. Mm-hmm. So what happens when, like, let's say you do get a book, like I think a lot of people will be like, my message, it's so similar to a million other messages out there. What would you say to somebody? Like, what are you looking for that might be just that little bit of differentiation? Because are you saying that it has to be completely different, or are you saying it has to have, again, this sort of, where does it fit on the bookshelf? I think you said, like, speaking of bookshelf, the back of your display is amazing. It's so suiting of you, but like, where would it fit on your bookshelf, that I see behind you? And so let's unpack that a little bit. Like, is it just a null idea if it is a Eat, Pray, Love, or if it is, Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, or whatever, it's sort of, how do you
differentiate?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what the book is, but sometimes it's just your voice, so again, with my Jen Sincero, You Are a Badass example, I think she's one of the first, authors in the wave, I would say, of kind of like boss lady boss, and then they get a little, more boss bitch,
edgier.
That whole wave. I think she was either at the front or riding that peak. So that's voice, that's voice, and having an authentic voice that speaks to your people. Sometimes it's taking a slice, if it's the 5-second rule or 5-minute rule, and you have, some portion of that you have really honed and solidified and perfected, then it's talking about that as, a comparable, as a companion piece to the 5-second rule. So that's a different kind of publishing. If you loved this, then you'll like this, This is a great, this is the ketchup to the French fries, right? They go together, which is different than, an iconoclast who's like writing something that's completely unique, maybe, launching your college age kids so that they don't come back home to live, maybe that's a unique topic that not many people are doing, but there's a lot of need, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Out there. So, it takes some investigation, and that's what we do. So some of it is the authenticity of the author and their desires and their voice, and then seeing what the ecosystem already has and where you can slot yourself in.
Okay. And then, so we've got the motivation, the positioning, the who. What's the next step that you go through?
So then the next step is about the how. So the how is, a big is a big idea. Number one, I coach, and some of my coaching clients come to me to, because they want to be published by a traditional publisher. And I work with them on book proposals and helping them, identify agents and publishers and all of that. Others are maybe interested in like a hybrid publishing situation, where again, I can help them in very much the same way. And then others are interested in finding out about self-publishing, and even self-publishing. There's lots of different routes. So you're going to self-publish with a platform like Ingram Spark or Amazon KDP, or are you going to like warehouse your own books? Or, there's a lot of questions. So how you're producing your book should certainly be in your mind, even when you first started, because those choices have, different paths, but they also can cross over each other. You may want to have your book traditionally published, and then you pursue that and it doesn't happen. And then you decide, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it myself because it means something to me, and you self-publish it. It can be that you self-publish it and then a publisher identifies it as a good copyright and then, asks you if they can publish it, and then they reissue it as their book. That absolutely happens sometimes. Or vice versa. You have published authors who are traditionally published who decide, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own for a variety of reasons. So understanding how you're going to produce your book is important, because in terms of producing your book, you need to get it to your audience. And you also have to start thinking about how is your audience going to know about your book. If you are working with a traditional publisher, they're obviously going to be promoting your book and marketing your book, although they are going to rely on you as an author to do that as well and to support them a lot. But as a self-published author, you're going to be carrying that entirely on your own. And what you want to do is you want to be bringing your audience into the behind the scenes of what you're doing from the very start. Even if you don't know what you're doing, I'm thinking about writing a book. I'm not even sure what kind of a book, let me take you on my journey of journal writing, just really begin to get it out there. And then you will see the people who are interested. And that is going to give you a sense of like who your audience is. Like there's just so much market research that we can do now with social media that, in the dark ages 30 years ago, we were all plundering around just, making assumptions. We don't need to do that anymore, so that's the how. It's kind of a very multifaceted and very tactical of all of them.
Yeah. And so the sort of prepping your audience. And like you said, you could even just put it out there to your followers now, to your friends, your family, whoever, people at work, whatever. Listen, I'm journaling. I'm thinking about writing a book. Don't know what it is yet. What would be the call to action then if you were starting that, regardless of sort of the path to publishing, like the how you're going to publish? I guess that is the path to publishing, is like sort of promoting it, but the how you publish it, one of those options.
Yeah.
But what would you say the call to action is? So like, let's say I'm, for example, I actually just divulged that I've been doing this journaling, and then, but yeah, what would be the call to action? Would I start a separate page?
Absolutely.
Is there a call to action?
I think even it's always great to have a landing page where you can put information. You might have some surveys. I'd start off by just like maybe doing some videos, like I'm doing a thing, bring them in on that. Then if you have, these are 3 different topic areas that I find myself drawn to. What do you guys think? Do a survey, see what comes of that. Start conversations on different topic areas, see what gets engagement. Then you can start kind of blogging some of your writing, and, you can put a teaser on social, drive them to your website so that you can capture some email information, some real data, and ask people to comment what's hitting, what's not hitting, and refine from there. Or maybe not refine from there. I'm not saying that we're like at the whimsy of the audience, but I do think that this market research is so amazing, and sometimes it really tells you a truth that you kind of know, but you don't want to believe.
Love it. I really do love it because exactly you get into your own head and you start thinking, no, this is what they want. This is what they want. But in fact, it's kind of, they wanted this, you know? So I think it's like you're saying, it's keeping you in touch with, potentially this tribe that you're building so that you can then write the book for them, and even actually sort of thinking like just out of the box a little bit, like just even doing a bit of collaboration. So what, I've got, I need an idea for another chapter in this topic, maybe you can throw that around too. So no, I love that. I love, love, love that. It's such a good pre-launch strategy sort of thing. So we've got motivation, positioning. So step 1 is motivation. Step 2, positioning. I paraphrase a little bit here. Step 3 is the who. The step 4 is the how. And do you have another step?
No, those are the 4 steps.
Okay, the 4 steps. So when we were talking, Linda, you on our pre-call, you had said that, ways of working with you. And so you can go full, from start to, getting published. And then, or you've got some sort of do-it-yourself kind of guide. Is that?
Well, I have coaching. So I do one-on-one coaching. And I also am putting together a coaching cohort, which will be a small group. And I am working towards doing some downloadable resources. I have a positioning worksheet, which I would be happy to make available to your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put the link to that in the show notes.
I'll give
for
you
sure.
that.
Yeah.
For the show notes. And that's a good resource to begin to understand your audience and the position of your book. But yeah, and I also do a 1-hour mastermind. All of this is on my coaching page, which I'll also give you a link to. And, the coaching can really be at any stage in the process. I have authors come to me with like an outline and they don't really know where to go from there. As I said, I've helped authors who are looking for, traditional publishing, help them create proposals. I'm helping an author right now who's, we're producing her book, but she wants some support around publicity and promotion. So we're doing coaching for that. So the whole 9 yards.
So you don't have to work with an author right from the very beginning. You can sort of parachute in at moments. Yeah. No, that's really good. At the very beginning, you talked about, sort of adapting your style to give the author some agency. I wanted to go into that a little bit, and then we kind of got into our conversation. So maybe we can just back up a little bit and talk about that. Why is that important?
Well, I find that in publishing traditional, I think I was saying that in contrast to traditional publishing. Traditional publishing is a business and it's a wacky business, but, publishers believe that they know the audience, they know the market, they know what sells, they know what doesn't sell. They take risks on manuscripts. They pay authors in advance, hoping that they are going to earn out their royalties. Therefore, they have a lot of power in how a book is presented, how long a book is, how it's being produced, the cover, how it's being promoted, whether it's going to be supported, if they're going to have ads for it, if they're going to ship it to conferences, all of that. The publisher is making a business decision about that based on what they think they know, which is really reading tea leaves, and they,
I love it. I love it. Yeah, no, exactly.
But you have a number of books. You're publishing, 500 books a year. You're probably going to be right about, 20% of them, maybe 15% of them. The rest can be completely wrong. And those are the numbers that publishers work with. I mean, that's why, no one should really get into publishing to make money. No, right. It's not that. It's really an act of love more than anything else. An author is just one small wheel in this larger machine in a traditional publishing experience. When an author is self-publishing, it's their motivation, it's their money, it's their effort. Now, I don't work with authors in any kind of a subordinate way. I mean, if an author is coming to me, they are paying me good money for my expertise, and I will give them my expertise, but I will also collaborate with them. If we present them with what we think is the best cover for their book and they absolutely hate it, we will work with them to sort of unpack where we're seeing this differently and either try to get them to understand why we think it's great or absolutely revise until we find something that both the author and both I think is appropriate for their market. I'm not going to let them go out with something that is going to shoot them in the foot, because even in digital, that cover is just so critically important. It's really the poster for your book. Or the same with writing. An author, the first thing I do if an author has a manuscript or even a partial manuscript is we do an editorial evaluation. And a lot of authors say, oh, it just needs a little proofreading and it's ready to go. And, if my editorial director does not believe that, we'll say that. We'll say, no, actually, this needs, in-depth editorial development because of this, this, and this. Or it needs, a serious rewrite because of this, this, and this. And if they disagree, then, I'm not going to work with them because I'm not going to waste their time and money on something that is not professional, that is not going to compete in the arena with books that are produced by, Random House. So, but still they have agency. They have agency. They can choose to work with me. They can choose to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
I work with them on the book that they want to create.
Yeah. And so, just helping them get clear on that first step, which is the motivation,
Mm-hmm.
I really love that. And then that helps them sort of then narrow in on where they headed. And that sort of gives them that agency, as you say. And I think it's easier to work with them then if you've got that motivation and even just a little bit of like, who are they speaking to? And, because I think you've been around it long enough and seen so much that you would know if that who is actually resonating with the motivation, I guess, if you will. Yeah, no, it's really good. So so this has been a great interview. I enjoyed thoroughly meeting you for the first time and now getting a chance to talk to you the second time. It's been wonderful. And I think you've given off a lot of really great tips that I think people can definitely at least get started if they were thinking about creating a book. And I guess, they can always just stop in and check you out on your website, which you're going to give to me right now, and, book maybe just even a bit of a discovery call as well.
Absolutely. So the website is Studiolo Secondari, and that's Secondari with an I.com. And we have on every page a button to schedule some time to speak with me. And I love talking to authors about their books. I get really excited.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I always have lots of ideas and I'm happy to share those in a quick free consult. And then, if they like what they see, then we can see how best to work together. But I would love to talk to you, Lynette, about what you've been writing. Sounds like you've got a really interesting book there.
Yeah, it's been, we can talk about it for sure. I've been sort of spending the last 4 years is traveling around Mexico. And at some point, sometimes I feel like a bit of a lost little sheep, but other times I feel so connected. So that's kind of what I've been writing about a little bit. And then just kind of my situation.
Sort of eat, pray, love.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even when that Eat, Pray, Love did come out years ago, I'll never forget my sister said to me, she was standing on my driveway, I think she was picking up my kids too. And she's like, girl, you need to read this book because I think this is you. I was like, what? And so then that's the only way how I found out about it. And then, I think it was book tapes back then, bought the book tape and slid it into the CD player into my car. Oh my God, dating myself now for sure. But and Linda, you definitely are on my radar. I am definitely going to be tapping your door here in the next couple of months because the theme is evolving. The themes are evolving, but they are getting narrower too. So it's been good. So, okay. Well, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your journey. You're a true testament of like taking your skills and continually reinventing yourself. So wonderful for that. And I think you're doing a great thing for the world. So amazing. And I'll put all the show notes in the show notes. I'll put the links to your website, how people can get in touch with you. So thank you, Linda. And I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you. Take care.
Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.